Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Just wanted to put together another part of this tutorial for the TikTok app. Um, I am working on the social media tutorial because I know that some folks have been asking when part 9 is gonna drop for that, and I'm currently working on it. But I started doing some experimenting with the TikTok app because I wasn't overly satisfied with the direction that I ended up going for displaying ads to users and having to use a bottom sheet for that. If you watched the last parts of this series, you would know that I originally wanted to use custom code to incorporate the advertisements into the actual video feed, but the code that was needed to make that happen was overcomplicating this tutorial. And I want to keep this as FlutterFlow centralized as possible so that the average person can come in and replicate what I'm doing here without having to actually learn how to code in Flutter and in Dart. So I ended up backing off of my original intent and decided to do an advertisement setup using a bottom sheet. But I again wasn't overly satisfied with that, and so I started exploring other options that might be possible within FlutterFlow to make that happen. And I have found a solution that appears to work quite well. So I'm going to give you a layout of how to actually incorporate advertisements directly into the feed itself, rather than having to pop up a bottom sheet to show that to the user. So that'll be one thing that we're looking at today. The other thing that we're also going to look at here is how we're going to set up the curated display of videos based off of a user's watch history. The big tech platforms use machine learning to do this, but machine learning is extremely complex. It's not something that most people can just sit down and take on right out of the box. It's a very complex learning curve to be able to do that. So we're obviously not going to utilize machine learning to make this work for this app. But there is an alternative solution using mostly components within FlutterFlow, and just a little bit of custom coding, not a whole lot. And I'll provide the code to you so that you can have access to it. But it's kind of a very simple machine learning type approach. It's not machine learning, but it kind of replicates it in a way as far as what it's going to do. So anyway, I'm going to try and knock both of those out in this tutorial. And I think what we're going to start with is actually how we're going to categorize a user's watch history, so that we can begin in delivering personalized content and videos to the user that would be similar to other videos that they tend to watch more frequently than other things on your platform. So what we're going to do then to make that happen is we need to use the timer widget. Kind of a pivotal part of how this is going to work. However, if you've ever tried to play around with the timer widget, you will notice that if you try and drop the timer widget anywhere inside of a component that is generating a backend query, so I'll just put it in this column since this column is a part of the query for the video feed. If you go to your errors up here, you will find right here that you're throwing an error that essentially you cannot put a timer widget into a query your Firebase, because the timer widget is meant to be applied locally, more of a local state variable to the user's device rather than pulling it from Firebase. So you can't utilize the timer in this way by dropping it anywhere inside these components that are linked to our query. So what we would need to do then to make the timer work with our setup here is we'll go to our widget tree, and since our entire widget tree is based out of this stack, which again we have this stack because there are some elements on this page that do not need to be queried, because we don't want them to change. We want them to stay static as the user swipes through the page view here. And one of those items would be this nav bar. We don't want that to change every time they swipe up and down, so it's sitting on that stack outside of the query. So what we'll do is just go to our stack here and go ahead and just add the timer to that stack. Right, and I think my timer's kind of down here out of view. But you can see up here that we're not throwing an additional error anymore because it's not tied into the backend query. So that's what we want. That's right along where we want it to be. Right now that timer is up here, and I'm going to change the text color for it so we can see it a little better, but I am going to hide it. It's not going to be visible to the end user when we're done with this. All right, so there's the timer up there. So first, what I want to do, and you can do whatever you want here for the duration. What this is going to do is, in combination with some actions and things like that, if a user stays on a particular video for X amount of seconds, and that countdown gets down to 0, then it's going to trigger the action flow to begin updating that user's profile to give them some association to other videos that carry similar data. So again, you can have this thing trigger every 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, 10 minutes, doesn't really matter. You can do whatever you want. For this example, I'm going to do 60,000 milliseconds. It's in milliseconds, obviously, which is the equivalency of 60 seconds or 1 minute. So if a user stays on a video, watching a video for 1 minute or more, this timer will get to 0 and it'll trigger my action flow that we're going to set up here in just a second. All right. Okay, so in order to make this setup work then for what I'm going to be doing here, sorry, I had to move my mouse around a little bit. So we need to be able to, when the timer gets to 0, where's my timer at? There it is. When it gets to 0, it's going to trigger an action on timer end. It's going to trigger an action to update the user's document. And what we need to do when we trigger that action is we need to pull the what we're going to just call as the hashtags, for just to keep it simple. But every video is going to have hashtags in it, assuming a user adds hashtags to their video. So every document will have hashtags, and so when that timer goes to 0, we need to be able to acquire those hashtags from whatever video the timer was counting for, to be able to update it to the user document. Now, because the timer is not associated with the query, we have to define a way to be able to obtain that information from the query document to be able to pass it over to the timer. And the best way that I found to do this, and I think it's really quite straightforward, is to actually go ahead and set a local app state variable. And so what we're going to do is add a field here. I'm just going to call it temp hashtags, or yeah, hashtags. And I'm not going to set it as a list. I'm just going to set it as a string because the hashtags associated with the video will be entered in a string field. They will not be entered in a list field. So I'll just stay as a string. And we are not going to persist this because this is just a temporary holding so that the timer can do its thing and the action flow can proceed one way or the other. So we'll just go ahead and set that, and then let's go back over here. All right, so next thing that I want to do then, to be able to send data over to that local state that we just created. So I'm going to go to my page view, and I'm going to go ahead and set an action in here. So this is an on-page swipe action. So every time the user swipes to go to a new page, it'll trigger this action. We're actually going to set 3 actions in here. The very first action that we're going to do is related to the timer. And what we're going to do is we're going to trigger the reset of the timer. So let's say your user is on page 1 and your timer is down to 25 seconds and they swipe to a new page. You want that timer to go back to your original count, which for me is 60 seconds. That way, every video that they land on is getting the equal amount of time to determine whether that video is something that the user is interested in. So again, reset the timer first, and then we're going to add another action to update app state. We're going to add our field, and we're going to grab that temporary hashtags field that I got there. And we're going to set the value as a variable. And here's probably a step that could be confusing to some, but it's really quite simple. As you can see, I don't have a drop down next to my feed documents. I'm getting a list here. I'm not referencing a document. So how do I get the data field where those hashtags are being held from the video that is being played, if all I'm getting here is a list of documents rather than a reference document? So before I do that, I do want to jump back over here and go into my collections and make sure. Yep, okay, so I got it in here. So hashtags, it's a string, so that's what we want. All right, so we already got that in there. So I'm going to go back over here in my action and set this as a variable, and I'm just going to go ahead and select the list that's being queried here. And whoops, let me back up. Got ahead of myself there. So, all right, under available options, I'm going to go down here to item at index, and then list index options. I'm going to do specific. Then I'm going to do a variable, and go to widget state. And I'm going to select page view current index. And that'll give me the current video that is displayed to the user. And then document properties is where I can get that data field where I'm going to pull the hashtags from. So you can see I've got this data field here for hashtags. I'm going to select that, click confirm. And so now whenever a user swipes to a new page, it resets the timer, and it loads the hashtags into our temporary app state field that we had set up. And then lastly, we want to trigger one more action here, and that's going to be our timer again. And we're going to leave that as start timer. So this starts the timer at whatever maximum amount of seconds you have it at. And so now we're good to go. Everything is good here. All right, so that takes care of that. So now we need to trigger our action from our timer whenever it reaches 0. Okay, so if it reaches 0, timer end, let's go ahead and add an action here. And go to your Firestore, we're going to update document, and we're going to update the authenticated user, grab the reference, and then we're going to set a field. And the field that we're going to grab here is going to be in, looks like I Okay, I never set it, so let me go back. We're gonna go ahead and set that real quick. I'm gonna go into users, and I'm going to set this as just gonna do video hashtags. Now, I am going to set this as a list. So we're gonna do list, we're gonna do string. Okay, let's go back over here, back to our timer. Now we can select that from our user reference. So video hashtags list here, and we're going to add to set from variable, and we're going to get that from our app state that was set by that page swipe. So we're going to grab temporary hashtags right here, and that's gonna create a new row inside of that list field in the user's document. So once we do that, then let's add another action, and let's go back to our app state. Where's that at? I think I passed it up. Update app state. Let's select the temporary hashtags, and we're going to clear the value. So we're going to set that temporary hashtags field back to empty so that it's ready for the next page swipe. Okay, so that's all taken care of now. So we are passing our hashtags from our video to our local state. Our timer, if it reaches 0 before they swipe to a new page, our timer grabs those hashtags from the local state, pushes it to the authenticated user's document, and then erases anything that was in that temporary hashtag. If the timer does not get to 0, they swipe on the page, then timer gets reset. The hashtags get filled in again with new variables, and the timer gets started over again. All right, so that's how we achieve passing those parameters. So now, there's a couple other things that we need to do to actually manipulate the data that's being put into the user's authenticated user's document into that list field to actually more adequately display things that they like. And so this is where we're actually going to use just a little bit of custom code to make it happen. Okay, so what we need to do at this point then, jump up here real quick. Our action flow that we just set up and everything would be adding strings of hashtags to this field. So let's say a video had 3 hashtags. The hashtags were funny, happy, and party. So funny, happy, and party. Okay, that's all fine and dandy, and it's been added to this as a row in this list field. And then the user triggers another video, gets more hashtags, that three totally different hashtags, and then they get another video that has maybe hashtag happy, sleepy, and party. So it's got some similar hashtags to another entry that was made. So we're getting this long list of strings of hashtags. How do we apply that to sorting videos that the user may find interesting? Doing it just out of the box and trying to do any sort of filtering directly to this field, it would be incredibly difficult to try and quite frankly, it might be impossible. I'm not entirely sure, but it'd be very difficult to curate these different tags and make them relate to each other, and also make them make perhaps one hashtag more prevalent than the other. Let's say that they've accrued 10 hashtags that say happy, and then they've got 2 hashtags that say sad. Well, how do we prioritize the happy hashtags over the sad hashtags? Well, what's the method for making that happen? So here's how we're going to do that. And this is where we're going to utilize some custom code real quick. So what we're going to want to do with this custom code that we're going to be using, that I've been working on it, and it seems to be working the way that I wanted it to. What it's going to do is it's going it's an action custom code, so custom action, and when it's triggered, it is going to take a reference that will tie into it to the authenticated user, and it's going to loop through all of these entries into this list field. So it's going to go through each one, looping through it and snapshotting each one. And then it's going to parse the data that's in here, and it's going to pull out hashtags. So let's say happy is in here 10 times. It's going to pull the word happy out, and then it's going to add the number of times that happy was found inside the list. And so it's going to pull happy out, and it's going to associate the number 10 with happy, and it's going to put that into another list field that we're going to create shortly. And then from that list field is where we're going to get our priority as far as what videos should be shown as it relates to certain hashtags. So using a count of integers to be able to indicate which videos should be shown above others is going to be the most ideal way to do this without actual machine learning. So that's what we're going to be doing with this particular code here. And then I'm also going to show you how we're going to trigger that code and how often, because we don't want it to happen every time. That's the other thing, is that we don't want it constantly running. And when it does run, it's actually going to delete everything out of this field so that it doesn't count the same thing twice. And that's another reason we don't want it to run too frequently. And also a part of this custom code, there is there's a filter inside of the action that if any hashtag in this list is only represented 3 or less times. So let's say that the hashtag sad has only been entered in 3 times or less, then it's not going to parse that data and put it into the next field. It's going to ignore it, because basically what it's doing is saying, okay, well, the user only stopped on 3 videos out of I don't know, 100 videos that had the word sad in it. So really, that's probably not something that they're very interested in seeing. So it's going to not parse that data and use it as a part of the calculation. It'll just leave it in this field. All right, so let's go ahead and go to our custom code over here. And we are going to add, like I said, a custom action, and I'm going to grab I've got the code over here in an editor, so let me just bring it over real quick. Okay, so this is the code, and we need to grab this right here. This is going to be the name. It needs to be associated up here, or you'll throw an error. And our any arguments that we have in return values, when I save it, it'll plug that stuff in for me automatically, so we don't have to worry about that. So anyway, going down through here real quick, as you can see, it's a word count map, so it's mapping these items. It's going to iterate through the string in the list. So it's going to go through each string, as noted, so each row in that list. And it's going to pull the word, so like the hashtag happy, it's going to count how many times it was listed in each of the strings, and it's going to add those up together, and then it's going to return that word and the count associated with it. And then of course down here, this is our filter that says that if hashtag was only represented in that list field 3 or less times, then essentially it just ignores it, and it doesn't do anything with it beyond that point. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and save. And it's going to tell me right here that my new parameters do not match the ones in the editor. Click yes, and it's going to add them in for me. So you can see it through what I needed over here. As my parameters, my return value is a string as a list. And my this is a reference. This argument is a reference to the list field that's going to be holding our hashtags that it's going to iterate through. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and compile the code. I'm going to pause while I do that. It'll take a little while, and then we'll get onto it. Okay, so it's actually not going to let me compile it because I have errors up here. For some reason, I was thinking that was no longer an issue, but I guess that problem still exists. So anyway, we don't really need to compile it right this second. I'm not gonna run a test in this video. I'm actually probably gonna split this this tutorial up, so it's not extremely long. So I'll get the errors and everything cleared out so that we can run tests on this stuff at the end of the section of this part of the tutorial. But in any case, so we've got it here, and I can make use of it over here in the editor as it is, so that's good to go. All right, so let's jump back over here real quick. So how are we going to trigger this? How are we going to make this thing update and run that custom action? So I debated on where I wanted to store the return value. I could just store it right back into the user's document, or we could store it as a local value. And honestly, I think I may store it as a local value. That way, kind of cuts down on the number of backend queries that you have to do, at least at this point. So I'm going to go back in here, and I'm going to go ahead and add another variable here. And I'm going to set this as curated video content. And I'm going to leave that as a string, but I am going to set it as a list, and it is going to be persisted. All right, now to trigger this action. So let's go back to our page view. We're going to go back into our actions here. I didn't do this at the beginning when we were setting these actions up because I didn't want to jump into the custom code before explaining everything else. Didn't want it to be confusing. But what you need to do is go ahead and copy this action chain and then delete it and save it for a little bit. And I should have done this just a minute ago, but let's go back over here to our app state and create one more field. And this, you can name it whatever you want. I'm going to call it curate trigger. And I'm going to set that to a string, and I'm going to persist it, not a list. I'm sorry, not a string. Curate trigger, integer, not a list, but I am persisting it. And create that. All right, so now we're going to go back into our page view here. We're going to go to our actions. And we're going to go ahead and set a conditional action up here and a single condition. And I am going to go to my app state, and I'm going to select my curate trigger. And just leave that. There's no further changes. And I'm going to set this as is greater than or equal to. And now you can set this to whatever you want. So every time the user swipes the page, if this number has not been met yet, it's going to add 1 to the count that's being stored in this local state curate trigger. So it really depends on how often you want to trigger that custom action that we created. So I'm I think I'm going to set it. I'm going to set it to 100 swipes. So every 100 swipes is when that custom action will trigger and update. All right, so I'm going to confirm that. So if curate trigger, the local variable, is equal to or greater than 100, it's reached that point, we're going to set our true actions over here. And the very first action that we will set is our custom action down here, or get words with count, with total count. All right, so in our list string variable here, I'm going to go to authenticated user, and we're going to grab that video hashtags list string where the list is being held, so that it can iterate through that and make the counts. And you can leave that as no further changes. Confirm. And you do want to set an action output variable. You can name this whatever you want. Let's put it as that. And then we're going to set another action. And we're going to go to update app state. And we're going to add a field. And the field that we're going to add first is our curated video content string list. And we're going to set that. And we're going to set it as a value. All right, we're not going to add to list because we're not adding individual items. We're going to set the entire value and add all of the results to that string list. This way, what this will do is every time this action is triggered, it'll cause the user's curated data to change. So let's say somebody is really interested in watching happy videos for a while, but then they get interested in watching sad videos. We want to make sure that this content can be updated to reflect appropriately. So we're going to set the value, which will replace whatever was stored in the app state with the new values that were derived from that custom action. So we'll set the value. And we'll go down here to action outputs, and we'll grab this output that I created for the custom action, which was the hashtags. Hashtags count results, which is a list string. And you leave that as no further changes. Confirm, and that will. Oh, and turn this off. You don't want to do that. No rebuild. All right, so that'll update their app state there. And then one last thing that you want to do here, add an action, and Firestore update document, authenticated user reference, confirm, add field, and we're going to go down here to our video hashtags list field, and we're going to delete. So we want to remove everything out of that field so that it's entirely fresh. That way we're not getting duplicate counts when we run the custom action again. It'll be all new data that's coming up in there. Okay, and then you can terminate. And then over here on the false, what we need to do is set an action, and we're going to update app state. And we're going to, and I forgot something over here. We're gonna have to go back over there. I apologize, but let's go down here to curate trigger, which is our integer. Let's set, and we're going to increment by 1, or you can increment it by however much you want, but I'm going to do it by 1. We don't want to rebuild. Let me jump back over here real quick. I do need to add another field, and I need to add that integer field. And we need to clear the value. So that needs to be set back to 0 as well, and no rebuild. Okay. All right, so we got that, updating our app state, adding 1 to that integer. And now right here, let's go ahead and paste our other actions back in, which was our timer. And this, actually, we don't really need to update twice. Not absolutely necessary. Yeah, let's actually get rid of that. Let's just include it with this update right here. So we'll do curate trigger, and we will increment by 1. And make sure you do no rebuild. And then we can terminate. All right, there we go. So that's how we're gonna that's how we're going to associate video tags to a user to curate certain data that may be more appealing to them. And we're actually going to add another tab up here, or I may just use following. I don't know yet. May add another tab for another video feed. And in that video feed, that's where we'll curate that those feeds that'll display videos that have hashtags similar to the hashtags that were ranked by our custom action in the local state for the user, the local state user. So hopefully that makes sense. I know I kind of hammered through that one real quick. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. But that is the idea there. So that's how we're going to do that. And like I said, I'm breaking this tutorial up. I'll do the second part, which will go over displaying advertisements in the feed itself. I'll show you how to do that. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and it'll make your app look a lot better to the user. And then lastly, I do have a working custom video code that I'm gonna make available to you at the end of part 2 of this tutorial segment. And we're gonna replace the FlutterFlow video player with that custom video component. So, but we'll get to that in the next part. So that's it for this one. You can find the code to that custom action in the description of this video. And again, just all you need to do is copy the entire code and paste it into a new custom action and tap save. Or I'm sorry, before you tap save, make sure you grab the name at the very top, which is to the right of the list string. At the top of the code, it's get words with total count. Copy that, paste it into the name for the action in the editor. Then click save and click yes, and it'll add your parameters and return value in for you. And you can go ahead and compile it, or you can work with it in your editor and compile it later if you're having trouble getting it to compile with errors or whatever. As far as the code goes, the code does compile itself without errors. I've already tested it, so it is good to go. All right, that's all for now. Hopefully this little video is informative of kind of how to oh, you know what, I forgot to hide that. Make sure you hide this. And I think how I will do that is I'm just going to send it to the back. Yeah, maybe not. You can go bring to back. Okay, it's not oh, okay, yeah, I understand now. That's right. Yeah, this black part is the very back. So that's why it's there. So I'm going to just do this, I guess. I'm going to go in here, and I guess I'll make it transparent that way. All right, so now it's invisible. Can't see it. All right, so yeah, that's it for now. If you have questions, just put in the comments or go to the Discord and talk to me there. I'm more likely to respond faster on Discord. And as always, if you like the content that I put out, you can buy me a coffee at my Buy Me a Coffee page I guess what it's called. I'll put a link in the description of this video. All right, yeah, I think that's it for now. We'll tackle the other stuff here shortly. All right, have a good one.